Alex Drake adjusted his visor, the oppressive darkness pressing in on him like a physical weight. The HUD inside his helmet flickered slightly, casting an eerie, greenish glow over the crumbling infrastructure around them. They were descending into a world where light was an intruder, where shadows seemed to coil and shift with a life of their own. The dim, sputtering lights that lined the ancient walls did little to pierce the gloom. "Keep your eyes open and your weapons ready," Alex ordered, his voice steady, despite the unease settled like a heavy fog over his team. He glanced at his companions, 6 of the best soldiers he had ever served with. They moved in silence, each step echoing ominously in the narrow, claustrophobic tunnel. The sound seemed to bounce back at them, distorted and malevolent. "Anyone else feeling like we shouldn't be here?" Martinez, the youngest of the group, muttered under his breath. His voice carried a hint of nervous laughter, a futile attempt to dispel the foreboding silence. "Cut the chatter," Alex snapped, though he couldn't shake the sense of unease gnawing at his gut. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. The unease had started the moment they'd entered the tunnels, but now was growing, morphing into a tangible sense of dread. The tunnel widened into a larger chamber, the walls adorned with rusting pipes and ancient, corroded machinery. The air was thick with the metallic tang of decay and the faint, acrid smell of something far less identifiable. A whisper of movement caught Alex's eye, but when he turned, there was nothing, just the same foreboding darkness. "Check for signs of life," Alex commanded. The team fanned out, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. The beams of light revealed unsettling scenes, splatters of dark, dried blood on the walls, abandoned high-tech equipment scattered haphazardly, and walls scrawled with cryptic warnings. The words were smeared and barely legible, but they radiated a sense of urgency and despair. "Looks like there was a struggle here," Jensen observed, his voice low and tense. "But where are the bodies?" Alex didn't have an answer. His mind raced through the possibilities, none of them good. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as if the darkness itself was alive, breathing down their necks. They continued their descent, each step taking them further from the safety of the surface and deeper into the unknown. The whispers of the unknown seemed to grow louder, and the walls felt like they were closing in. The oppressive darkness was all-consuming, an ever-present reminder that they were venturing into a place that defied logic and sanity. Ahead, the tunnel split into multiple directions, each path equally uninviting. Alex consulted the digital map on his wrist, but the signal was weak and intermittent. It was as if the very environment was working against them. "We stick together," he said, making the decision to take the leftmost path. "No one strays, no matter what." As they moved forward, the oppressive silence was broken only by the sound of their breathing and the faint hum of their equipment. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, each step amplifying the feeling that they were descending into the heart of darkness itself. Finally, they reached another large chamber, this one dominated by a massive steel door, half open and covered in claw marks. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he approached, the oppressive darkness threatening to swallow them whole. "Ready up," he whispered, and the team raised their weapons, prepared for whatever lay beyond. The whispers of the unknown grew louder, a cacophony of dread that echoed through the oppressive darkness. And as they stepped through the door, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a nightmare from which there would be no escape. The tunnel beyond the massive steel door was even darker, if that was possible. The narrow passage seemed to absorb their flashlight beams, making every shadow stretch and grow until it felt like the darkness itself was reaching out to them. The oppressive atmosphere was almost suffocating, pressing in on Alex and his team with an unrelenting weight. "Stay close," Alex ordered, his voice a low growl in the silence. They moved forward, the walls closing in on either side, their footsteps echoing unnervingly. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and something unearthly that sent a chill down Alex's spine. Suddenly a noise shattered the silence. An unearthly growl reverberated through the tunnel, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Alex froze, his heart hammering in his chest. His team tensed, weapons raised, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. "Did you hear that?" Jensen whispered, his voice barely audible. "Yeah," Alex replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Eyes sharp, everyone. The growl came again, closer this time. It was followed by a rustling sound, like something large and many-legged moving swiftly through the shadows. The team fanned out, their flashlights darting in all directions, but the darkness seemed to swallow the light whole. Without warning, a figure lunged out of the shadows. It was grotesque, a nightmarish fusion of human and beast, its limbs twisted and elongated, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. The creature let out a blood-chilling screech, and the air was filled with the stench of rot and decay. "Open fire," Alex shouted, and the tunnel was filled with the deafening roar of gunfire. The creature recoiled, its flesh ripping apart under the barrage, but it didn't fall. Instead, it charged, moving with unnatural speed and agility. The team fought with everything they had, their survival instincts kicking in as they struggled to fend off the nightmarish creature. Blood-chilling screeches echoed through the tunnel, mingling with the sounds of gunfire and the shouts of the team. Finally, with a final, desperate burst of gunfire, the creature collapsed, its body twitching and convulsing before going still. The team stood in the eerie silence that followed, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, their eyes wide with shock and fear. "What the hell was that?" Martinez asked, his voice trembling. "Something that shouldn't exist," Alex replied grimly. He approached the fallen creature, his flashlight revealing its grotesque features in horrifying detail. It was a grotesque amalgamation of human and something else entirely, its flesh twisted and deformed, its eyes still glowing with a faint, eerie light. "Looks like those experiments went way beyond what we were told," Jensen said, his voice barely above a whisper. Alex nodded, a sense of dread settling in his gut. "We need to keep moving. There could be more of these things." As they continued down the tunnel, the sense of unease only grew. The walls seemed to close in tighter, the darkness pressing against them with a tangible force. They passed more signs of a struggle, splatters of dark, dried blood, and broken, abandoned high-tech equipment. The cryptic warnings on the walls became more frequent and more desperate, scrawled in a language that was barely legible. "Eyes up," Alex warned, his voice tight with tension. "Stay sharp." The oppressive atmosphere was unrelenting, each step forward feeling like a step deeper into a nightmare. The air was thick with the sense of impending doom, and the whispers of the unknown seemed to grow louder, a constant, unnerving presence. They reached another chamber, this one even larger and more foreboding than the last. The walls were lined with rusting pipes and ancient, corroded machinery, and the air was filled with a faint, acrid smell that made Alex's skin crawl. "We need to find out what happened here," he said, his voice echoing in the oppressive silence. "And we need to get out alive." As they moved deeper into the chamber, the oppressive darkness seemed to close in around them, and the sense of dread grew stronger. They were walking into the heart of the nightmare, and there was no turning back. The control room was a stark contrast to the tunnels they had trudged through. Bathed in the sickly glow of malfunctioning screens and the hum of ancient, deranged machinery, it was both a sanctuary and a prison. Alex stood at the center console, his hands trembling slightly as he wiped a layer of dust from the main control panel. The oppressive atmosphere of the tunnels had given way to an eerie, electric buzz, as if the room itself was alive and watching them. "Get these systems online," Alex ordered, his voice cutting through the unsettling hum. Martinez and Jensen moved to the auxiliary stations, their fingers flying over the controls. The screens flickered and danced with static before resolving into a series of fragmented logs and video feeds. "What do you make of this?" Martinez asked, his voice tinged with unease as he accessed a video file. The screen lit up, showing a series of experiments that defied any sense of ethics or sanity. Men and women subjected to unimaginable tortures, their bodies twisting and changing, becoming the nightmarish creatures they had encountered. Alex watched in horror, the unrelenting dread coiling tighter around his chest. The experiments aimed at creating super soldiers had gone horribly wrong, transforming human subjects into monstrous entities driven mad by their mutations. These weren't just accidents, Jensen said, his voice low and tense. They were deliberate. Someone wanted this to happen. Or they lost control, Alex replied, his mind racing. We need to find out who was behind this and why. And we need to make sure none of this ever sees the light of day. The logs were filled with cryptic warnings and increasingly desperate entries from the scientists. The once cohesive team had descended into paranoia and madness, their minds unraveling under the weight of their own hubris. Alex felt a shiver of recognition. He could see the same fate waiting for his own team if they weren't careful. As he scanned through the logs, a series of coordinates caught his eye. They pointed deeper into the facility, to a place ominously labeled Project Nexus. Project Nexus, Alex muttered. Whatever it is, it's our next stop. Do you think we can handle it? Martinez asked, his voice barely hiding his fear. We don't have a choice, Alex replied, steeling himself. We need to end this, whatever it takes. The team moved out, the oppressive silence of the control room replaced by the unrelenting dread of the tunnels. Every step deeper into the facility seemed to amplify the sense of paranoia, as if the walls themselves were closing in. The darkness was no longer just an absence of light, but a living, breathing entity, whispering insidious thoughts into their minds. Alex shook his head, trying to clear the fog of unease that settled over him. Phantom voices echoed in his ears. Shadows flickered at the edge of his vision. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to focus. They were close to the heart of the nightmare, and there was no room for doubt or fear. They reached another set of reinforced doors, these ones marked with the same cryptic symbols they had seen scrawled on the walls. The air was thick with the stench of decay and something far more sinister. Alex's hand hesitated over the door controls, a chill running down his spine. "Ready up," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The team readied their weapons, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The doors hissed open, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with grotesque, pulsating machinery. At the center, a massive containment unit throbbed with a sickly green light, its surface crawling with unidentifiable symbols and sigils. The oppressive atmosphere was almost unbearable, a tangible force pressing down on them. "This is it," Alex said, his voice tight with tension. "Project Nexus." As they stepped into the chamber, the whispers of the unknown grew louder, a cacophony of dread that seemed to echo from the very walls. The air was thick with the stench of madness and despair, and the oppressive darkness seemed to close in, suffocating them. Alex approached the containment unit, his heart pounding in his chest. The logs had hinted at something unimaginable, something that had driven the scientists to the brink of insanity. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the cold, pulsing surface of the unit. Suddenly the room was filled with a blinding light, and the air was filled with unearthly screams. Alex staggered back, his mind reeling as visions of horror and madness flooded his senses. He could see the scientists, their minds unraveling, their bodies twisting into monstrous forms. He could hear their screams, their pleas for mercy, and their final, desperate warnings. Alex Jensen's voice cut through the madness, pulling him back to reality. He shook his head, clearing the fog of insanity that threatened to overwhelm him. "We need to shut this down," Alex said, his voice steadier than he felt, "before it consumes us all." As they worked to disable the containment unit, the oppressive atmosphere grew more intense, the whispers of the unknown becoming a deafening roar. The sense of impending doom was palpable, a constant, unnerving presence that seemed to press in from all sides. But Alex refused to give in to the fear. He focused on the task at hand, his fingers flying over the controls. The unit's lights flickered and dimmed, and the screams began to fade, replaced by an eerie, unsettling silence. "Is it over?" Martinez asked, his voice trembling. "Not yet," Alex replied, his eyes scanning the darkness. "But we're one step closer." As they prepared to move deeper into the facility, the oppressive darkness seemed to close in once more, a reminder that the nightmare was far from over. The whispers of the unknown still echoed in their minds, a haunting reminder of the horrors that awaited them. The oppressive air in the facility seemed to thicken with each passing moment, the shadows around them growing darker and more sinister. The once cohesive team felt the strain of their environment, their unity starting to fracture under the relentless pressure. Alex could sense the desperation in his squad, the fear that seeped into their bones, making every whispered breath feel like a death sentence. "We need to cover more ground," Jensen said, his voice tense and edged with frustration. "We're wasting time moving as a single unit." Alex hesitated, the memory of the creature they'd fought still fresh in his mind. Splitting up was a risk, but so was staying together in this twisted labyrinth. The cryptic symbols on the walls, the phantom voices that seemed to follow them, all combined to make every decision feel like a leap into the abyss. "All right," Alex said, finally conceding. "Martinez and Jensen, you take the left passage. Avery and Rogers with me. We meet back here in 30 minutes. Stay sharp and keep comms open." The team split, the silence between them a palpable thing. The narrow corridors seemed to pulse with a malevolent life of their own, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The oppressive darkness closed in, and every shadow seemed to whisper insidious thoughts. "Alex, this place is getting to us," Avery said, her voice barely masking the fear that tinged every word. "I keep seeing things, hearing things that aren't there." "Keep it together," Alex replied, his tone harsher than he intended. "It's the environment. It's messing with our heads. Just focus on the mission." They moved through the corridors, the oppressive atmosphere growing more intense with each step. The walls felt like they were closing in, and the air was thick with a sense of impending doom. Alex's mind was a whirl of paranoia, every flicker of shadow and every distant sound amplifying the insidious whispers at the edge of his consciousness. Ahead, the corridor opened into a large chamber, its walls lined with grotesque, pulsating machinery. The air was filled with a low, thrumming hum that set his teeth on edge. Alex scanned the room, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. "Looks clear," he said, though he didn't believe it. Nothing felt clear in this place. As they advanced, a series of loud clicks echoed through the chamber. Alex turned, his heart hammering in his chest. What was that? Before anyone could respond, the lights flickered and died, plunging them into complete darkness. Avery let out a stifled gasp, and Alex's hand tightened around his weapon. "Everyone stay calm," he said, though he could feel his own pulse quicken. "Activate night vision." The room transformed into a landscape of eerie green, the oppressive darkness now a field of distorted shapes and shadows. The machinery seemed to move in the unnatural light, the shadows lengthening and twisting into nightmarish forms. A sudden, blood-curdling scream tore through the silence. It was Jensen. The comms crackled with his panicked voice, barely coherent. They're everywhere. We can't hold them off." "Jensen." "Martinez." Alex shouted into the comms, but there was no response, only the echo of static and distant screams. "They're gone," Rogers whispered, the words filled with a hopeless finality. "Stay focused," Alex ordered, though he felt the creeping dread settling in his own mind. "We need to keep moving, find a way out of here." As they pressed on, the walls seemed to close in further, the oppressive atmosphere growing heavier with every step. The corridors twisted and turned, a labyrinth of nightmarish design that defied logic and sanity. The whispers of the unknown grew louder, a cacophony of voices that gnawed at their minds. Roger suddenly stopped, his eyes wide and frantic. "I can't do this. They're in my head. I can hear them. They're saying." "Roger, snap out of it," Alex barked, grabbing him by the shoulders. But it was too late. Roger's eyes glazed over, and he let out a strangled scream before bolting down the corridor, his footsteps echoing into the darkness. "Damn it," Alex cursed, knowing they couldn't afford to lose anyone else. But chasing after Rogers would mean risking everyone. "We need to stay together," Avery said, her voice trembling but resolute. Alex nodded, the oppressive atmosphere weighing down on him like a physical force. "We move forward. We find the others. We get out of here." They continued through the maze of corridors, every step a battle against the insidious whispers and the oppressive darkness. The walls felt alive, closing in, breathing with a malevolent intent. The air was thick with the scent of decay and madness. Finally, they reached a dead end, a massive, reinforced door looming before them. Alex approached it, his heart pounding. The door was marked with the same cryptic symbols they had seen throughout the facility, a haunting reminder of the nightmare they were trapped in. "This has to be it," Alex said, his voice barely a whisper. "Whatever's behind this door. It's the source of all this." As he reached for the control panel, the whispers grew louder, a deafening roar in his mind. He hesitated, the oppressive darkness threatening to overwhelm him. But he forced himself to focus, to push through the fear. The door hissed open, revealing a chamber bathed in a sickly green light. At its center, a massive containment unit pulsed with an unearthly energy. The oppressive atmosphere was almost unbearable, a tangible force that pressed down on them from all sides. "This is it," Alex said, his voice tight with tension. "This is where it all ends." As they stepped into the chamber, the whispers of the unknown grew louder, a haunting symphony of dread that echoed through their minds. The oppressive darkness closed in around them, a reminder that the nightmare was far from over. The chamber beyond the reinforced door was vast, a cavernous expanse filled with grotesque, pulsating machinery. The air was thick with a sickly green light that cast unsettling shadows on the walls, making them appear to writhe and twist as if alive. The oppressive atmosphere was almost unbearable, a tangible force pressing down on Alex and his remaining team members. At the center of the chamber stood the massive containment unit, its surface crawling with unidentifiable symbols and sigils that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The oppressive darkness was almost suffocating, the whispers of the unknown becoming a deafening roar in their minds. "This is it," Alex said, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of dread. "Project Nexus." As they approached the containment unit, the air grew colder, the sense of impending doom more palpable. Alex could feel his heart pounding in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears like a drum. The oppressive atmosphere was so intense that it felt like the air itself was pressing in on them, trying to crush them under its weight. "We need to shut this down," Avery said, her voice trembling but determined, "before it consumes us all." Alex nodded, steeling himself for what was to come. He reached out to the control panel, his fingers trembling slightly as he activated the interface. The screen flickered to life, displaying a series of cryptic warnings and error messages. The oppressive darkness seemed to close in, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. "Keep an eye out," Alex warned, his voice tight with tension. "We don't know what else is down here." As he worked to disable the containment unit, the machinery around them seemed to pulse and writhe, the oppressive atmosphere growing more intense with each passing second. The whispers of the unknown filled the air, a haunting symphony of dread that gnawed at their minds. Suddenly the ground shook violently, and a deafening roar filled the chamber. Alex turned, his heart pounding, to see the massive doors at the far end of the room burst open. From the darkness beyond emerged a nightmarish figure, a grotesque amalgamation of human and machine, its body twisted and deformed by the horrific experiments that had taken place here. The creature let out a blood-curdling screech, its glowing eyes filled with malevolent intelligence. It charged toward them with unnatural speed and agility, its twisted limbs reaching out with deadly intent. "Open fire," Alex shouted, and the chamber was filled with the roar of gunfire. The creature recoiled, its flesh ripping apart under the barrage, but it didn't fall. Instead, it seemed to grow stronger, its movements more frenzied and desperate. Alex fought with everything he had, his survival instincts kicking in as he struggled to fend off the nightmarish creature. The oppressive atmosphere was almost unbearable, the whispers of the unknown becoming a deafening roar in his mind. The air was filled with the stench of decay and madness, and the shadows seemed to close in around them, suffocating them with their malevolent presence. Avery and Rogers fought alongside him, their faces grim with determination. The creature was relentless, its attacks growing more frenzied with each passing second. Alex could feel his strength waning, the oppressive atmosphere sapping his energy, but he refused to give in. "We need to draw it away from the containment unit," Alex shouted over the din. "We can't destroy it while it's active." Avery nodded, her eyes filled with grim resolve. "I'll distract it. You and Rogers take it down." Before Alex could protest, Avery charged toward the creature, her weapon blazing. The creature turned, its eyes locking onto her, and let out another ear-splitting screech. Alex and Rogers took the opportunity to flank it, their weapons aimed at its vulnerable spots. The battle was intense, the oppressive atmosphere making every movement feel like a struggle. The creature was a whirlwind of destruction, its twisted limbs lashing out with deadly force. But Avery's distraction worked, giving Alex and Rogers the opening they needed. With a final, desperate burst of energy, Alex and Rogers unleashed a barrage of gunfire, their shots finding their mark. The creature let out a final, agonized screech before collapsing to the ground, its body twitching and convulsing before going still. The chamber fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting slightly as the creature's presence faded. Alex's breath came in ragged gasps, his body trembling with exhaustion and relief. "Is it over?" Rogers asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not yet," Alex replied, his eyes fixed on the containment unit. "We need to shut this down for good." As they moved back to the control panel, the oppressive darkness seemed to close in once more, a reminder that the nightmare was far from over. The whispers of the unknown still echoed in their minds, a haunting reminder of the horrors that awaited them. Alex's fingers flew over the controls, his mind racing as he worked to disable the containment unit. The screen flickered and glowed, the symbols and sigils pulsing with an unearthly light. The oppressive atmosphere grew more intense, the whispers becoming a deafening roar. Finally, with a final decisive keystroke, the containment unit powered down, the oppressive light fading to darkness. The chamber was plunged into silence, the whispers of the unknown fading to nothing. "We did it," Avery said, her voice filled with relief. "It's over." Alex nodded, his body sagging with exhaustion. But as he looked around the chamber, at the twisted machinery and the fallen creature, he knew that the true horror was only just beginning. "We need to get out of here," he said, his voice filled with grim determination. "And we need to make sure this never happens again." As they made their way out of the chamber, the oppressive darkness seemed to close in one last time, a reminder of the nightmare they had faced. The whispers of the unknown were gone, but the memory of their horrors would haunt them forever. The oppressive darkness seemed to retreat, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The containment unit's lights had faded, but the room still thrummed with a malevolent energy. Alex Drake knew their nightmare was far from over. The air was thick with the scent of decay and the faint, acrid tang of burned electronics. Every breath felt heavy, laden with the weight of what they'd witnessed and what still needed to be done. "We need to move," Alex said, his voice cutting through the silence. His body ached with exhaustion, but there was no time to rest. The self-destruct sequence they had triggered was counting down, a relentless reminder of their impending doom. Avery nodded, her face pale but resolute. "Let's finish this." The team moved with purpose, their steps echoing through the labyrinthine corridors. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to close in once more, the walls whispering insidious threats and promises of despair. But Alex pushed forward, his focus unwavering. They had to destroy this place, ensure that nothing escaped to the surface. The path to the facility's core was a gauntlet of horrors. The creatures they had fought earlier were only the beginning. Abominations lurked in the shadows, their twisted forms a testament to the perverse experiments conducted here. Each encounter was a desperate struggle, every shot fired a fight for survival. As they neared the core, the ground trembled violently. The facility was tearing itself apart. The oppressive air was filled with the deafening roar of machinery and the eerie wail of alarms. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline pushing him forward even as his muscles screamed in protest. They reached the core chamber, a vast, cavernous space dominated by a massive reactor. The oppressive light of the reactor cast long, sinister shadows across the room. Alex approached the control panel, his fingers flying over the keys as he initiated the final phase of the self-destruct sequence. "Alex, we have company," Avery shouted, her voice edged with panic. From the darkness emerged the ultimate horror, a creature larger and more grotesque than anything they had faced. It was a nightmarish fusion of flesh and machinery, its body pulsating with an unholy energy. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to thicken, the air vibrating with a malevolent presence. "Buy me time," Alex yelled, his focus locked on the control panel. The final sequence was complex, designed to prevent any accidental activation. Every second counted, and the oppressive countdown ticked louder in his mind. Avery and Rogers opened fire, their weapons blazing in the dim light. The creature roared, its voice a guttural, inhuman sound that reverberated through the chamber. It charged, its massive form moving with terrifying speed. The team scattered, using the environment to their advantage, but the creature was relentless. Alex's hands moved with precision, his mind blocking out the chaos around him. The final command sequence required his full attention. He could feel the oppressive weight of the creature's presence, the air around him charged with dread. "Almost there," he shouted, his fingers flying over the keys. The oppressive sense of impending doom was a constant companion, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. A scream pierced the air. Rogers went down, his body crumpling under the creature's massive blow. Avery fired desperately, her face a mask of determination and fear. The oppressive atmosphere was almost unbearable, the weight of their situation pressing down on them with relentless force. "Got it," Alex yelled, slamming the final key. The reactor's hum shifted, a deep, ominous tone that signaled the countdown had begun. "We need to move. Now." The team bolted for the exit, the oppressive air filled with the sounds of their desperate flight. The facility shook violently, debris raining down around them. The creature roared in fury, its pursuit relentless. "Go, go, go," Alex shouted, pushing Avery ahead of him. They raced through the corridors, the oppressive darkness closing in from all sides. The ground buckled beneath their feet, the walls cracking and groaning under the strain. The oppressive countdown was a constant reminder of their limited time. Alex's lungs burned, his muscles screaming for relief, but he pushed on. They had to escape. They had to survive. They burst into the main tunnel, the oppressive darkness giving way to the faint, distant glow of the surface. Freedom was tantalizingly close, but the facility was coming apart around them. The oppressive roar of collapsing machinery and the deafening wail of alarms filled the air. Almost there, Avery cried, her voice filled with desperate hope. The final stretch was a blur of movement and noise, the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on them with every step. The exit loomed ahead, a beacon of hope in the chaos. They sprinted toward it, their bodies fueled by sheer willpower and the primal urge to survive. As they crossed the threshold, the ground beneath them erupted. The oppressive force of the explosion propelled them forward, a searing heat licking at their heels. They tumbled into the open air, the oppressive darkness finally giving way to the pale, wan light of the surface. Alex lay on the ground, his body battered and bruised, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The oppressive weight of the facility was gone, replaced by the vast open sky. He rolled onto his back, staring up at the clouds, the oppressive tension slowly melting away. Avery crawled over to him, her face streaked with dirt and sweat. "We did it," she said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and relief. Alex nodded, his mind still reeling from the ordeal. "Yeah," he said, his voice hoarse. "We did." As they lay there, the oppressive silence of the facility replaced by the gentle sounds of the outside world, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction. They had faced the heart of darkness and survived. But the memory of the horrors they had witnessed, the oppressive darkness they had endured, would haunt them forever. "We need to make sure this never happens again," Alex said, his voice filled with determination. "No one can ever know what was down there." Avery nodded, her eyes reflecting the same resolve. "Agreed." As they stood, the oppressive weight of their journey still lingering, they knew their fight was far from over. But for now, they had survived, and that was enough.